Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be stretching our hamstrings. And first of all, what is your hamstring? Your hamstring is a group of muscles on the back of your thigh, and it's a group of three of them. They're the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and the biceps femoris. But the purpose of this video is not an anatomy lesson. But before we jump into how to stretch the muscle, we have to first understand what does the muscle do, right? So these three muscles, they do the flexion of your knee, and they do extension of your hip. So when we go to stretch that hamstring, your knee should be straight and your hip should be flexed, because we're putting that muscle in a maximally lengthened position so we can get that stretch. So essentially, when we hold that stretch, we're going to be in a flexed hip and a straightened knee. And so all of the variations of a hamstring stretch that I'll show you today are just derivatives of that principle of putting the muscle in maximally lengthened position. And the hamstrings are cool because they cross the knee and the hip, but that also makes them a little bit more difficult to stretch. So if you see people stretching the hamstring with a bent knee but a flexed hip, you're putting it on slack where your knee is and you're stretching it at your hip. So instead of getting it half right, we're going to maximize the stretch by putting it at its end length in both joints. So what are some good principles that we can use when we stretch our hamstrings? So first of all, you don't want to stretch at your spine like this, because your hamstrings are still on slack. So instead, we're going to use what's called a hip hinge. So pushing our butt back maximally lengthens our hamstrings while keeping a straight knee. If we don't do that and we bend purely at the spine, there's no effective stretch being put on the hamstring group. So it's important that we bend at our hips first, and if you care to, you can then go into a spine bend after that. And you'll see that at the end when you can actually touch your toes in the last stretch if you followed everything. And another tip for you guys is before you start your hamstring stretches, I highly recommend warming up your body through a walk or a sauna or a hot shower or a cup of coffee. This stuff gets you ready for the stretch, because if you try to stretch while you're cold, you're going to put yourself at risk for injury, for DOMS or delayed onset muscle soreness. And generally speaking, whenever we're doing mobility, you want to warm up your joints and your muscles for the best results. And it'll just feel better. I promise. Try it out. It'll help out. Okay, so jumping into the first stretch is the seated knee prop. And so this stretch is for the beginner, the person who has no experience with flexibility training. You literally sit in a chair, you put your heel on the ground. The purpose is to lengthen the hamstring. And how do we make sure that happens? The knee is straight and the hip is bent. And your pelvis should be neutral. So you can get an anterior tilt or a forward tilt, but just keep it neutral. Don't rock it forward or back. And then control your core through your abdominals. And yeah, if you want to make the stretch harder, you can point your toes up towards the ceiling. And if that creates a painful stretch in your calf, that's okay, because you're actually lengthening a nerve back there. But if it's uncomfortable, you can actually point your toes forward. It will not affect your hamstring. And next we have the same thing essentially, but it's kneeling, so it's a more athletic position. I think you can get better leverage on your hamstring in the same position kneeling. And a tip on this guy is that back leg should be supported with your toes, because if your toes are straight back, personally, I have balance issues. But essentially, it's the same thing. The knee is straight, the hip is flexed, and on this stretch, you can actually focus on getting an anterior tilt, and that really lights up your hamstring. And the cue here is to bend at the hip and try to put your chest on your knees. And I know that's kind of intimidating, especially starting out, but really you just need to get to an intensity where it's about like a 5 to 6 out of 10. And if you can do that and you can sit there for about 30 seconds, you're going to make progress. Especially if you repeat that for multiple sets. So I recommend four to six sets. And if you're just starting out, maybe just one set of 30 seconds for each of these stretches. And what helps me too is to breathe through the stretch and just to relax my body. And I was listening to a podcast when I was recording this stuff. So, put on some music, whatever you find enjoyable to you, and that you can just sit in that position and breathe and bring your chest to your knee. That will yield the maximal benefit for you if you can actually do the stretch every day. And we'll talk about frequency a little later, but first we're going to get through the sequence. And next in the sequence is the straight leg raise. And you do not need a belt, but I think the belt makes it so much easier. So essentially, you're going to wrap the belt around your midfoot, and if you want a more intense stretch, you can wrap it around your forefoot because that's going to bring in the calf, which I have a tight heel cord, which that's a whole nother video. But for this stretch specifically, the ground is going to keep your pelvis neutral, your lower back neutral, so you're trying to keep everything flat, essentially. So you just keep your back flat against the ground, and then you're going to pull with your hands until you feel a stretch in the back of your thigh, your hamstrings, and you're going to sit there for 30 seconds. And important on this one, you can see my knee is kind of slightly bent. I don't like that form exactly. I would like the knee to be bent a little bit more. So if you have to, I would suggest less hip flexion and more knee extension, and then gradually bring it up to where your tolerance is. And then switch legs. And if you do not have, you could use a towel, you could use a belt, but if you don't have anything at all, you could also use just your hands to hold on to the back of your thigh and then focus consciously on keeping the knee extended fully, which is kind of difficult, which is why I recommend the belt personally, but whatever floats your boat on that one, go for it. And the final hamstring stretch in this progression, at least, is the standing. Well, it's because when we think about hamstring flexibility, we think about somebody who can touch their toes, easy peasy. And here we have a hip hinge, right? This is the basis of all hamstring movement. So when you go down to lift something from the floor, you need to be able to have a great hip hinge. And then once you do the hip hinge, I would say you are allowed to bend through the spine as long as you bend through the hip first. And then, try to fold in on yourself, so get your chest to your knees, right? And just sit in that position for at least 30 seconds. You can go longer, of course, but at least 30 seconds breathing through it. And yeah, and after you do a hamstring stretching regimen, you can move on to hip flexors, whatever your goals are. I'll have more information for you guys. But to wrap this up is the frequency of stretching. So how long should you be doing this every day, and how many days a week should you be doing this? So I would say at least 2 days a week minimum. You can do it every day depending on how your muscle responds, because as I was saying before, the delayed onset muscle soreness can be quite uncomfortable for many people. And if you want to see a big change, what you need to do is do it every day and then use that muscle in the gym in a maximally lengthened position. So you can be doing Romanian deadlifts where you have a straight knee and a hip that's flexed. And if you use your hamstring through the full range of motion, you're going to lock that in to functional movement. And so that's the thing, guys, is when you stretch your muscle out, you need to also use your muscle through the full range of motion of the joint capacity. And so fitness is not unidimensional. So like big biceps, big calves, big quads, but inflexible. So like that guy is strong, but he's not functional. And so I'm trying to bring the knowledge that there's more than one movement system of the body, and there's more than one way to train your fitness level, and you should be doing them all simultaneously. So I believe you should be stretching, and you should be weight training, and you should be doing cardiovascular exercise, because you get the most benefit by doing everything. So that's it for today, guys, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a good one. Peace.